Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation of See You in the Morning. This will be part 2, chapter 2, entitled Izuku's Side of the Story So Far. When Midori Izuku was 13, Inko stopped coming home. He would like to say that it came as a surprise, but most of his life, after turning 4 and getting diagnosed as quirkless, there was a great divide between the two-person family. Most of the developments were slow, less and less talking between them, Izuku walking to school by himself by the time he was 6, Inko taking more and more hours at the hospital she worked at, and so on. By the time Izuku turned 12, he mainly was living by himself anyways, having to work under the table at a quirkless-run, quirkless-serving cafe just so he could buy groceries and school supplies. Inko would often forget to do both, as she rarely was even home. Thankfully, though, she did pay for the apartment, and on the days she was home she would restock the kitchen and other parts of the house. Izuku knew that Inko wasn't the best mom. He overheard kids at his middle school talking about their moms or even their dads, and they sounded nothing like Inko. But Izuku understood that he was the reason Inko wasn't a good mom. He heard the people at the quirk doctor's office and the store and the people at the school. They all spoke about what a saint his mom was to keep him after his diagnosis. How if they'd birthed a quirkless runt, they probably would have killed it, for the better, they said. So Izuku wasn't stupid. He remembers when he was younger, before he got diagnosed, when his parents would spend hours on end playing hero with him in their apartment and taking him to the park nearby, letting him swing between them, holding their hands. After his diagnosis, that all went away. First his dad and Inko got into an argument for weeks. Then suddenly no dad, just Inko crying in her room and not coming out for days, even when Izuku himself had cried for her at her locked door for hours. After that, things went back to semi-normal, though Inko didn't talk much to him after she eventually emerged from her room. Young Izuku was determined to do the best that he could, because his mom was a saint just like everyone else said, and Izuku should have just been happy to still be alive after getting diagnosed. But that's all in the past now, because Inko isn't the best mom, and she left. She actually left weeks ago. But Izuku just thought she might be staying at a co-worker's house again, like she had in the past. Then the power for the apartment shut off, and it got cold, because the heat went with it, and the water no longer ran. A week after everything shut off, the apartment building owner had chased him out of the apartment with a literal broom. Where she had gotten it, he doesn't know, though he kind of assumes that she brought it specifically to threaten him with. She had always glared at Izuku when she would see him around the building. Even sometimes she wouldn't let Izuku into the building at all if she caught him trying to enter by himself on the rare occasion she was at the front desk. Thankfully, Izuku had already packed most of the important possessions in his bag, since the apartment wasn't super livable anymore, and he was able to grab the bag before being chased all the way out of the apartment building. The time between that and moving into his new apartment is mostly a blur to Izuku. He doesn't really want to think about it. It was cold. But then he moved into his new one-bedroom apartment. It had only been bare necessities and looked a little worse for wear in everywhere, but it worked, and it was warm. He could have just about cried when he had a hot shower for the first time since getting chased out of Inko's old apartment. The hot water felt so nice on his aching body. Then it ran out and turned cold. He got out of it quickly after that. It wasn't until almost 2 weeks later that he was drinking a mug of coffee in his tiny kitchenette area that he looked up and noticed him. A man, not super old, maybe late 20s, drinking something in an orange cat mug. The man had medium-length black hair and looked extremely tired. Hopefully his mug had chamomile tea in it so he could get some rest. Not that Izuku and his steaming coffee could talk. Izuku honestly hadn't even noticed that he was staring at the man, his neighbor apparently, until suddenly he was met with black eyes staring back at him. His tired brain not even really processing the fact he just got caught staring at a complete stranger in the middle of the night, Izuku just sips from his coffee again, not bothering to move his gaze. The man leaves not long after, oddly enough seeming to leave the apartment instead of going to bed. Kami. Izuku hopes the man wasn't on his way to beat the shit out of him for staring. Though he hadn't looked annoyed by Izuku staring, he had been beat up for a lot less. Izuku should have just stopped staring, doesn't matter how tired he was. Hopefully, the advertised break-in-proof doors of the apartment building weren't a lie, in case the man was actually angry. Deciding to not stick around and see, Izuku sets his mug in the sink and goes back to his bare room, just sitting on his bed for a while, staring at the white walls, before deciding to catch up on his missed schoolwork from when everything was a blur. Honestly, Izuku was starting to think his neighbor was doing this on purpose. It's been 7 days, or nights rather, of the two running into each other at midnight, drinking from mugs in their adjacent kitchens. But that would be crazy, because who would interact with a quirkless deku on purpose? It was the next night, and Izuku decided to put down his middle school uniform for now. The sewing was almost completely done, and if you squinted, you wouldn't even notice that it used to be torn all apart along the shoulder and back. Stupid Kachan and his lackeys. Time for coffee, because Izuku could feel that this wouldn't be a great night for sleep. Though, to be fair, most nights weren't great nights for sleep with Izuku. Padding down the short hallway, connecting his bedroom to the living and kitchen space of his little apartment, Izuku wonders if his neighbor would already be in his kitchen, or if Izuku would be first again to their nightly meetings. What Izuku was not expecting is to walk into his kitchenette only to look through the window and be met with 3 pairs of eyes. 2 wide with excitement, a dark-haired woman, and a blond man. Glancing behind them, Izuku also spots his neighbor, who looks tired, like always, watching Izuku as well. Nope. This was not what Izuku signed up for when he started having midnight coffees with his dark neighbor. Quickly exiting his kitchenette, Izuku mentally stresses about the 2 newcomers to the midnight coffee meets. Once he's safely back in his room, Izuku allows himself to freak out fully, breath coming in slightly too quick, and hands shaking. Though, thankfully, not a full-on panic attack, it still kind of sucks. And at the end of it all, he realizes that the 2 guests to midnight coffee were actually the Pro Heroes Midnight and Present Mike. Holy shit. Back to panicking. Eventually, Izuku calms down again, though he's sure it's at least an hour later. He knows sleep will definitely avoid him tonight, now that he's run away from Midnight and Present Mike, as well as his own neighbor like some idiot. So Izuku needs coffee. He just hopes he won't run into anyone this time. Creeping back down his short hallway and into his still lit-up kitchenette, Izuku decides it's all clear, quickly grabbing his gray mug again and making a hot mug of coffee to aid him in his insomnia quest. Sadly, Izuku gets a little too focused on his coffee and doesn't realize right away that he's being watched. His dark neighbor is back. No sight of the 2 daylight pro heroes, at least. Deciding that staying where he is better than running away again, Izuku vows to stay put for now, allowing his neighbor to keep him company, though he notices the man's orange cat mug and drink is absent for this later meeting. Finishing the last few drops of his drink, Izuku pauses before turning away to leave. He owes his neighbor some sort of an apology for his behavior earlier. Hopefully his neighbor knows JSL, though Izuku is guessing he will since Present Mike was chilling at his apartment. Izuku has seen the Daylight Pro Hero's hearing aids before when watching a fight of his in person about a year ago. What happened to the other 2 from earlier? He decides to ask, worried he might have ruined the 3's get-together with his rude behavior earlier. Hopefully he didn't. They're both getting ready for bed. Sorry if we startled you earlier. They wanted to meet you. Huh. Why is his neighbor the one apologizing? They did nothing wrong. It was Izuku's fault for reacting badly to the 3 of them. But another thing stood out to Izuku about his neighbor's signed words. Why would they want to meet me? Maybe it was a joke. Sarcasm doesn't translate the best when the person you're signing with is in a totally different building and doesn't seem too facially expressive anyways. Oh no, Izuku probably just missed the sarcasm or something. Abort mission. Abort. Izuku decides he's never leaving the sanctity of his little bedroom. He will sooner starve than leave these 4 walls, especially since he realized a few minutes later that Izuku had completely forgot to apologize. His neighbor probably thinks that Izuku is rude. He's literally never leaving his bedroom again. Of course, that won't work. And Izuku hasn't patched himself, as well as his possessions, back together after being stolen or beaten just to starve himself to death in his apartment. So instead, Izuku decides to avoid midnight coffees for a couple of days, after the accidental meeting with the 2 daylight heroes, through the panes of his kitchen window, on top of the awkward signed conversations with his dark neighbor. Instead, drinking coffee while at work at the Quirky Cafe and dedicating all of his time to school, work, and building up his stamina. Something he'd taken to after trying to run away from Kachan's lackeys, not long after he'd moved into his new apartment and being outrun by them, which resulted in one of the worst beatings to date for Izuku. So building stamina to run it was, every single day. The staff at Quirky Cafe were more than happy to host the younger teen more often than usual for those days, putting Izuku right to work, which he would never complain about. The patrons and staff at Quirky Cafe were a godsend for him, a purely quirkless community area. He learned so much about his own community while working under the table there. He even picked up a few rituals shared in the quirkless community, such as lying about his quirkless status at places that don't require ID, and instead claiming that his green hair and eyes are mutations instead of a normal genetic trait, as well as wearing a red star somewhere on him whenever going out. Because Sasha, a regular at the cafe, explained that if the Q and C generic red sneakers weren't enough of a cue for other quirkless that they are friends, then the red star is the confirmation. The next day, Sasha came in and gifted Izuku a necklace chain with a bright red star pendant on it. It was apparently gifted to Sasha when he was younger, then Izuku by another quirkless adult in Russia. Izuku wears his red star always. But eventually, Izuku forgot that he was avoiding midnight coffee like the heads-in-the-cloud teen he was, not even realizing his mistake until he was already drinking his coffee and was caught by his dark-haired neighbor. The man just signs hello at Izuku, who had paused mid-slurp before setting to make his own coffee. After a second, Izuku signs back, not wanting to be rude, but kind of panicking since he hadn't meant to attend a midnight coffee meeting. Deciding to just go with it, Izuku stays where he is until he finishes his hot coffee before waving goodbye to the man and leaving to go to work. It's a late shift, but the cafe technically never closes. It's a quirkless business habit. Since quirkless people tend to avoid general society to the best of their ability, plenty of us don't shop until after the moon has risen high in the night sky. All 15 of the quirkless run and used shops and safe spaces around Musutafu are the same way, running 24/7 every single day of the year to provide safe areas for quirkless people no matter what or when. A couple more midnight coffee meetings pass without much fanfare. Simple signed greetings and departures happen before Izuku gets a notification from the Quirkless Society Forum for Musutafu. They had lost another one of them, this time a young teenager, younger than Izuku even. They had committed suicide early last night. Gathering his backpack and grabbing a variety of supplies needed for staying away from home for a couple of nights, Izuku leaves his apartment, making his way to the quirky cafe, swiftly greeted by a crowd of other quirkless patrons and staff, all gathered in the dining area of the cafe, forming a circle and standing in silence. This was another ritual of the quirkless community that Izuku had grown used to since moving out of Inko's abandoned apartment. When one of their community died, they were all to meet at one of the 15 safe areas purely for their community. Once you got there, you were to stand in silence for as long as you wanted, before breaking to offer support to each other and speak about the one lost if you knew them, and listen about the one lost if you didn't. People all took their own schedule, but before you could return to your home or wherever you were previously staying, everyone was to visit each of the 15 safe spaces, repeating the process of standing in silence and then sharing stories and offering support. Izuku ended up taking 3 days, wanting to spend time with casual friends who he sometimes only ever ran into at these community rituals, but also wanting to hear about the young teen who they just lost. There were so many interesting stories about the teen. They apparently were really into pre-quirked history, as well as dogs, having told anyone who would chat with them about the amazing things dogs can do and how each breed was special for its traits and so on. They sounded like a wonderful person. But after 3 days away from his apartment, Izuku was finally home again, at just around 10 at night, so plenty of time to shower and do more missed schoolwork. Thankfully, at least, Izuku had managed to only miss school the first day of the vigil, as the other 2 days were the weekend, though he would have gladly missed school to attend the gatherings. It wasn't until a couple of hours later that Izuku wondered if his neighbor had still been attending their midnight coffee meetings in his absence. Deciding to put down his work for now, it was almost done anyways, Izuku sets off on his mission for coffee and companionship in the form of his eternally tired and scruffy-looking neighbor. And alas, there he was, already sipping from his orange cat mug when Izuku had flicked on his kitchenette's light. The two traded greetings, as had become the normal, though apparently Izuku's absence hadn't totally gone unnoticed, as the man swiftly asked where he's been. Still feeling a bit fresh, and knowing much of the quirkless community's culture isn't supposed to be shared with people outside of it for safety reasons, Izuku decides to not answer the question, but instead give the man something to call him. A couple ideas come to mind before Izuku settles on one. "Call me Midori." The man kind of looks skeptical for a second, and then Izuku laughs, when his black eyes glance between Izuku's green hair and his eyes, before seeming to huff. "Okay. You can call me Eraser then, kid." And wow, Izuku is slow, because his neighbor isn't just friends with pro-heroes, he is a pro-hero. Shit! He's neighbors with Eraserhead. He's been having midnight coffee meetings with a pro-hero for weeks. Trying to act normal despite the chaos in his head right now, Izuku settles for nodding at the man Eraserhead, then sets his gray mug in the sink, pours some water in it, and signs a goodbye before retreating back to his room to externalize his internal panic. What fun. Days pass again, and between work, school, and midnight meetings, Izuku falls into a comfortable schedule of sorts. He also learns a lot of new things about Eraserhead. The man rambles a lot. He's even worse than Izuku used to be, and that says something. Who knew an underground hero could ramble so much? You would think that they were the quiet type, not so chatty. Izuku learned about the man's 2 cats, Bastard and Tilly. Bastard sounds like a riot of a time, and Izuku thinks that if someone tries to kidnap him, using the cat for bait, they would probably succeed. Same goes for Tilly in all fairness. She sounds so soft and sweet from Eraserhead's descriptions. Izuku also learned that Present Mike wasn't just visiting his neighbor's apartment that one night weeks ago. He's actually Izuku's neighbor as well. And wasn't that a turn of events, though it explained the silver wedding band on Eraserhead's ring finger. He learned some other things, but they were smaller, like that his neighbor was actually drinking Death Wish coffee every night, which is concerning even to a pro-insomniac like Izuku, or that Eraserhead is actually going on nightly patrols after their meetings. Sadly, Izuku may have gotten too comfortable in his schedule, because that's when he ends up cornered at school by Kachan and 3 of his lackeys after taking the same path home for the 3rd day in a row by accident. Izuku honestly just wanted to get back home to his apartment so he could change and head to work. He had bills to pay and regulars to chat with. Izuku ended up with a few nasty scars that day, dragging himself home from behind his middle school. Hours after the last bell had rung, Izuku was consumed by his own thoughts. He's bleeding as he walks, actually leaving a spotty trail most of the trip, with the flow finally stopping just before he reaches his street, thanks to the wounds tentatively clotting over. He spends at least 2 hours in his tiny bathroom trying to clean and dress the slashes along his back from the young teen whose quirk allows him to lengthen and reinforce his nails. Izuku would honestly rather be whipped than deal with his classmate's quirk. Easier to reach than those wounds are some burns across his ankles, arms, and shoulder. Thankfully only 2nd-degree burns. He can easily treat those after years of practice. Finally, he reemerges and makes a beeline for his bedroom, honestly wanting to just pass out and sleep away the healing process. That's what he's done in the past, much easier than trying to do things while injured. So he does exactly that, only waking up to clean and redress his wounds, as well as make simple meals and text Tinto that he won't be able to come to work for at least a week. He eventually wakes again, to a text telling him to take as much time as needed, another perk of working at one of the safe spaces everyone understands. A while later, Izuku wakes again and realizes that most of his wounds have reached the point where they no longer sear with pain when he moves, and that the scabs are hard or flaking away already, showing the soft, tender pink scars left underneath. Time to rejoin the world of the living. Showering, Izuku texts Hinto again to let her know that he'll probably pop down to the cafe for a couple of hours today. He has bills to pay after all. All he gets back is a smiley face. He guesses that's good. Getting dressed, the green-haired teen slips on his red sneakers and a black jacket. Within the hour, arriving at the hidden cafe and being greeted with relief by the regular patrons, including Sasha, who simply smiles from his seat in the furthest booth from the front entrance. Laughing for the first time in a while, Izuku chats with the crowd before slipping away to grab an apron and a hairnet. Hinto doesn't say much, just hugs him before he can get to work and tells Izuku that she's glad he's okay. Hours later, Izuku is sent packing by Fuwashi, the younger cousin of Hinto, claiming that young teens like Izuku need better sleep schedules, completely ignoring the fact Fuwashi is only 3 years older than Izuku. But he doesn't mind. He feels tired and achy. Plus, if he leaves now, he might make it to his midnight coffee meeting with Eraserhead, assuming that the man had continued them again in his absence. He had. Eraserhead was there sipping Death Wish coffee when Izuku got home from the cafe. It's such a small thing, such a stupid thing. But suddenly Izuku feels like crying because this random neighbor he accidentally got to know waited for him to return to their meetings for nearly 2 weeks. Maybe it's because he doesn't know Izuku is quirkless, or maybe it's purely accidental, but it's more than a non-quirkless individual has done for him since he was 4. Deciding to get away quickly, before he gave away his rising tide of depressing emotions, Izuku quickly makes his mug of coffee, waves at Eraserhead and chugs the whole thing before setting it in the sink and leaving to go have his emotional breakdown in his bed. Because it's much better to be comfortable and depressed than standing in your kitchen being depressed in front of your favorite underground hero in the middle of the night. Time moves quickly, especially when you're as busy as Izuku is, though he learned his lesson and doesn't allow himself or let his guard down anymore and be lulled into a fake sense of security caused by having people and a consistent schedule. He does not want a repeat of last time. He has enough scars, thank you. They lose another 2 community members partway through the year, this time murder by a hate group known for hunting the quirkless population of Japan. Hopefully, they move their hunting grounds soon. There was a good thing, though. Yae, a middle-aged lady Izuku knew from the cafe as well as their vigil rituals, got married. Her husband had a minor quirk, the ability to sense the general emotions of those within 5 meters of him. They invited the quirkless community to the wedding, even including some of their rituals into the ceremony, such as using red flowers for everything, representing all the quirkless who didn't make it to the wedding, allowing them to be there in symbolism and in their hearts, as well as the groom carrying the biggest rock that he could find from the entrance to the altar. This was a practice created a couple of years ago when we realized we needed a way to include non-community closed weddings in our rituals. Sasha was actually the one to suggest the rock, saying it was to represent the non-quirkless partner's decision and dedication, an understanding of the weight that the community always has to carry with them. Basically, they were proving that they were ready to join the community, through marriage, if not through genetics. It was a beautiful wedding, and the couple looked so happy the whole time. The cake was also delicious, so that's a plus. But now that the school year is just about done, Izuku's graduating from Altera Middle School, which, while exciting, also means that he's been dealing with more and more minor wounds, and meaner insults from his classmates and other kids at the school. He's going to apply for UA, it's his dream, and nothing will stop him. Izuku wants to get in for all the quirkless kids and even now adults from the community that couldn't get in. He wants to prove that quirkless doesn't mean useless, not really. Sadly, his teachers are never on his side. It says here that Bakugo, you're applying just for UA. We know that you'll do it, and Deku says that you're also trying to get into UA. I ask that everyone take this seriously, Deku. This is not a joke. And there it is. Even his teachers call him Deku. Useless. Huh? Deku? Thought I told you to fuck off and not apply for UA. That's my school. And like clockwork, there's Kachan, always super supportive. Not. I know, Kachan, but, it doesn't hurt anyone if I apply. I thought I could at least try. Like they'd let some quirkless run apply to their school. Aren't there regulations against that? A girl in his class, whose quirk allows her to see in the dark, chimes in. Not anymore. They changed that a couple years ago. Stupid stutter. Izuku, no matter how hard he tried, can't kill this stupid thing. Not at school, at least. Thankfully, before Katan can yell at Izuku some more, the teacher calls the class back to quiet, looking pleased at how Katan is seething in his seat, glaring at Izuku. Fuck you too, teacher. The second the last bell rings, Izuku tries to pack up all of his things and flee the classroom before Kachan. Sadly, Kachan's lackey, the one with the nails quirk, grabs him by the shoulder to stop him from leaving, nails extending down to pierce his school jacket and draw a little bit of blood. And where do you think you're going, Deku? Yeah, useless front like you needs to be put in their place, right, Bakugo? Wow, they're pathetic. Well-trained dogs, if anything, always looking to Kachan like he's their master. The only warning Izuku gets is the sweet smell of nitroglycerin, which honestly makes his skin crawl now, before he's on the floor clutching the side of his face. Fuck, that hurt. Always with that right hook, Kachan. Things fade into pain. Mean-sounding words for a while after that. Izuku isn't even sure if the teacher had left yet before Kachan and his lackey started their attack. Probably wanted to watch for a bit, make sure their work came to fruition. Next thing Izuku knows, he's being hauled up by his uniform and shoved back into his desk, and the sight of his 13th analysis notebook is in Kachan's hands. It fills his blurry vision. I wonder if this'll get it through your stupid, underdeveloped head, Deku. You will not apply to UA. Got it? His notebook starts to smoke, and a whimper leaves his throat against his will. I said, got it? Why does it even matter, Kachan? You obviously don't think I can do it, so what's the threat of me applying? Boom. There's no threat, Deku. You're nothing but a pebble on my road to becoming the #1 hero, so act like it. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building and hope for a quirk in your next life. Numb. He feels numb as he watches his once childhood friend turned tormentor throw the ruined smoking remains of his 13th analysis notebook out the classroom window, while surrounded by his laughing lackeys. Numb is how Izuku feels when he eventually leaves the classroom to go look for the remains of said notebook. Numb is how he feels walking to his apartment from the school. Numb is how he feels when the manhole cover goes flying and he gets consumed by a slime villain. Surprisingly, he even feels numb when All Might shows him his skinny form and leaves him alone on a roof after telling him no. Everything is just numb, even as he leans over the edge of the roof, watching the traffic and people below. Sadly, it doesn't stay numb for long enough, and the next thing that he knows he's gasping for air, alone on the top of a very tall building. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do that to his community. How could he even think of doing such a thing? He's seen how much death hurts the community. Hours later, Izuku's sitting back at his apartment, trying to copy all the information from his 13th analysis notebook into a new notebook that wasn't burned, eaten by fish, and then coated in slime. It's a long and painful process in which he has to take many breaks to cry and resist the urge to scream. He has neighbors, after all. He clutches his red star every time he starts to regret not jumping off the roof instead of using the stairs. He won't do that to his community. He won't. It's just after midnight when Izuku realizes that he could really use a midnight coffee meeting, though maybe he'll have chamomile tea instead, just this once. He would really like to sleep for a while. Eraserhead is already there when Izuku walks into his kitchenette, flicking on the light as he enters, catching the trained eye of his neighbor immediately. He makes his tea in silence, not looking at Eraserhead until his tea is poured and he's sipping at it. No coffee for you tonight, Midori. No, not tonight. I went to sleep. He tries to keep his response neutral, but his neighbor looks slightly concerned regardless. Maybe it's the eye bags. How was your day? He decides to ask. Maybe a little bit of small talk will soothe his neighbor's concerns. Boring. Did a bunch of office tasks for my sadist of a boss, and lost a bet with a friend. I owe her dinner now. Izuku snorts. He's only known his neighbor for a couple of months or so, but this is the third time that he's lost a bet to who he assumed is Midnight. You should really stop betting with that friend. You never win. His neighbor just glowers. Well, tea is all gone. Time to hope it works its magic. Signing goodnight to the pro, Izuku goes back to his room to curl up and hopefully forget all about today, though maybe he would keep the memory of his midnight coffee meeting. He likes them. It takes a week for the idea to form, but when it does, Izuku feels stupid. He should be training. He should have been training for years now, but Izuku tends to miss the obvious at times. Too focused on details to notice the bigger picture, that's what Fuwashi says anyways. So Izuku joins a gym, lying about his quirkless status, and instead saying that he has a minor mutation quirk which gives him green eyes and hair. They buy it. So Izuku starts working out. He works hard. He now realizes that, while smarts is very important and his ability to analyze will get him far, he needs muscle and some sort of fighting ability to stand any chance of getting into UA's hero course. The months fly by like seconds. Meetings at the quirky cafe, midnight conversations with the Eraserhead, almost getting kidnapped for a quirkless human trafficking ring, shopping for workout gear, going to the gym, joining a dojo, walking away from the ledge a couple of occasions, and always clutching his red star as he does so. Sadly attending another vigil that took 4 days this time. And now the entrance exam for UA's hero course is just over 2 weeks away. Izuku's walking home from the cafe. It's around 3 in the morning, and Goji had just shown up to take over. Goji was another teen working at the cafe under the table like Izuku. He was really looking forward to going home and going to sleep soon. Sadly, life had other plans, which happens to follow its general theme of fuck Izuku that it usually does. This time it's in the form of being yanked into the alleyway beside where he was walking, squawking around the hand over his mouth as Izuku tries to get away from the person who grabbed him, only to see 2 more guys blocking his path to freedom anyways. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Why can't he catch a break? Look who we found, boys. A little quirkless dog. Think he'll be any fun, boss? We've been hunting him down for the past week. I want something in return for all our hard work. Don't worry, Hito. I'm sure we'll have plenty of fun skinning this particular prey. Oh, fuck. Looks like that quirkless hunting cult is back in Musatafu. He would have to put out the alert to the community for him once he gets home, assuming he survives. Look, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not fucking quirkless. It's fucking rude to assume that. I am, just because my mutation is minor. Sometimes pretending you have a quirk will get them to back off or pause long enough to make a break for it. Sadly, that is not the case here, as they do neither. Time for Plan B. Going into the offensive, Izuku lashes out, trying to at least incapacitate one of them. Thankfully, all it takes to take out one of the 2 blocking his escape is a throat jab, bashing their head into the wall of the alleyway. The remaining 2 curse, taking more serious fighting stances, which sucks for Izuku. Go for broke, he guesses. He lunges for the one further in the alleyway. He's the leader of the group. Maybe if he's down, the last one will back the fuck off. Only one way to find out. Izuku gets a good 3 attacks on the guy before he gets one returned in the form of being kneed in the stomach. He can hear the 2 of them laugh as Izuku throws up and gags on the ground of the alleyway. Fucking pricks. Taking the opportunity of them thinking he's down, Izuku lashes out with a small knife he had on his leg and manages to cut in deep near the knot leader's ankle. The guy curses loudly before stumbling and then being tackled by Izuku himself, getting minorly stabbed in the shoulder all the while. This is a matter of life or death for Izuku after all, even if he would rather not kill anyone. Sadly, taking out 2 of them is apparently as far as he will get, as the next moment he's being dragged off the knot leader by his hair and shoved into the filthy ground of the alleyway. Time fades away as pain blossoms across most of his body. His fucking ribs are probably broken from the way that the guy is kicking him. Oh shit, the guy has his own knife, significantly bigger than Izuku's own discarded one. He means like karma for him, since he did just stab a guy, but it seems a little bit unfair and cruel. Time fades away even further as the man seemingly carves into his skin with the hunter knife, before spitting on Izuku's prone form and dragging his 2 buddies away with him. Probably had a strength quirk, judging by the way that he hauled them with ease. Not the time, Brain. Not the time. He doesn't really care what quirk the guy had. It's not important. What he is focused on is his continued breathing. So after a couple more minutes, prone on the ground, dreading what he's about to do, Izuku slowly stumbles to his feet. Everything is unsteady, and he's bleeding everywhere, and there's vomit from earlier on his clothes. He's a fucking mess, is what he is. But there's no time like the present, and so he starts the 10-minute walk from the alleyway to his apartment, gaining a couple looks on his way home, though he notices no one offers to help him. Dressing his wounds after a thorough and painful shower to wash the grime off, and then soaking his wounds in disinfectant, Izuku spends little hours in his bathroom, before passing out right there on the floor. Not exactly the most comfortable. Actually, it fucking sucks, but he's exhausted and lost a lot of blood, so he understands why he gave out. He comes to again, what is probably only 5 or so hours later, hating everything because literally everything hurts. He checks all his bandages and is happy he only has to replace the gauze on a couple of them, before he crawls, his way to his bed and falls back asleep. Hopefully, when he wakes up again, some of the aching will have faded. His wish is not granted when he wakes up again, almost a full 24 hours later. Fuck. This is probably the worst he's ever gotten hurt. The guy really beat him black and blue before deciding he wanted to be a sculptor instead. Fuck him. Fuck his cult. He needs food and water. His mouth feels like cardboard and sand. Not a fun combo. He settles for a quick meal of plain bread before chugging a couple of mugs full of water and then crawling back into bed to sleep away the healing process. This continues for days and days. Eventually he remembers to contact Hinto as well as put out the alert on the community forum to watch out. A week or so into the healing, Izuku developed a fever. One of the cuts must have gotten a small infection, which he did eventually treat and tend to, but he still had to deal with the general shittiness that came with a light infection, which slowed down the rest of his healing for a couple of days at least. Finally after what is probably close to just over 2 weeks after his run-in with the Quirkless Killer cult guys, he can move around semi-freely without feeling like he's about to start bleeding again. Though he is reminded viciously how much he hates the general itchiness that comes with scabs. Holy shit. The entrance exam is almost here, and Izuku has been slacking off, laying around all day in bed. Doesn't matter that he almost died, he cannot fail the entrance exam. He throws himself back into his training, though he does have to take some breaks and set some restrictions so he doesn't fuck up his healing. Sadly, with all this as well as reassuring the Quirkless community that he's fine and doing okay and will be back at work after the exam date, he has completely flaked on midnight coffee meetings with Eraserhead. He didn't even notice until it was the night of the exam, but he really didn't have the time that night, so it would have to be okay for a bit longer. Izuku swore to himself that he would make sure to attend one of the meetings soon. The exam sucked. It was beyond biased, but Izuku passed. He passed. Sure, a bunch of his points were rescue points, but he did it. Fuck everyone who said he couldn't. And in the whirlwind of paperwork for UA, actual work at the cafe, as well as continued training for actual hero course classes, Izuku continued to flake on his neighbor. He really didn't mean to. It just slipped his mind amongst his excitement. So imagine Izuku's surprise when his neighbor introduces himself the first day of classes at UA as Aizawa Shota and their homeroom teacher. His neighbor who he's been drinking coffee with at midnight for a year, is his teacher at UA. The same teacher/neighbor that Izuku had been accidentally avoiding for just over half a month. Oh shit. And he's looking right at him. Midori, stay here so I can talk with you. Wow, what a way to make his anxiety spike through the roof. Izuku almost didn't even notice the reassuring, he thinks it's supposed to be reassuring at least, look from Uraraka, and he almost didn't hear Katan gloat about how Izuku is about to be expelled from the school as he passes by him. Fuck. How did Izuku manage to get himself in these types of situations? Well, better to get it over with, since apparently Eraserhead, or should he call him Aizawa-sensei now, isn't going to start the conversation. Hey, Eraser. It's nice to see you. All right, everyone. This concludes Chapter 2 of See You in the Morning. Chapter 3 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to this chapter, and as always, thank you so much for listening.